I knew that I would not. I feel good.
All right, well, God, it's great to be here, and this is a relatively civilized start, so hopefully everyone is feeling okay. Yeah, I'm going to begin this presentation talking a little bit about my own personal journey into this space. I spent almost 2 decades in digital analytics. I started a company back in 1997 focused on web analytics, and I love digital analytics, but I'm not doing it anymore. A little over a year ago, I spun out into a new discipline, and that's what I'm going to tell you about today. And I hope to make some converts to this new discipline because, frankly, while digital analytics is cool and fascinating and a lot of fun, so is what I'm doing now. And in many respects, what I'm doing now harkens back, in my mind, to the early days of digital analytics. It's raw, it's primitive, the technologies suck, the data quality is awful, and nobody knows how to do it. I love it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And yes, it is about extending analytics into the physical world. And I'm going to start with something that I think is really kind of funny. You know, if you think about it, I went back and I found online, you can find anything online, a screenshot of Amazon in, 1995. Looks pretty good, huh? It's like the first website a lot of us ever used, right? Maybe not, because Amazon wasn't even that big. I also found a picture of a Gap store in 1995. That's the Gap. Then I went and screenshotted Amazon 2016. And I went to my local mall, and I took a picture of the Gap. What do you notice about those two things? One is totally different, fundamentally re-engineered, far more beautiful, far more functional, better in every respect. The other, it's almost the same. I don't think that the implication of that is that physical retail is perfect and that it's so good that it can't improve anymore. What I take from that is that we're looking at two different disciplines, one of which has embraced the idea that analytics and continuous improvement can make you better, and the other of which has not. Stores have not changed. Websites have. And the difference is startling. And the thing is, stores can't afford not to change anymore because the two overlap in all sorts of ways. And it isn't just that so many people prefer to shop online, it's that people like Amazon are now going physical. Amazon Go is an incredible, intriguing, really interesting experience. It's a fundamental change in the way you shop. So it's not enough for people to say, well, stores are stores. They are what they are. No, they're not. Because the people who learned how to do this stuff in digital are figuring out now how to make stores better too. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how we bring those methodologies to the store. And as part of that, what I want to talk about a little bit is our thinking about omnichannel. When I go out and talk to folks, they're always talking about omnichannel. Every retailer I work with talks about how important omnichannel is to them. It should be. And as they think about that, what they're talking about is delivering a consistent, relevant, great experience across every channel that the customer touches. That's fine. Think about that. To do that, what you need to be able to do in channel is measure it. You need to be able to test to see what works and what doesn't. You need to be able to personalize that experience, and you need to be able to drive continuous improvement so that you get better and better. That's how it works, right? And if you think about it, in the digital world, even traditional retailers who built e-commerce departments have mostly gotten pretty darn good at this. When I go out and talk to people who are 30 or 40 years in retail, but they've got digital e-commerce teams, I'm often really pleased and surprised by how sophisticated they are. They do this stuff. And if you think about it, almost everybody in the digital world has at least gotten competent at this. There are still people who are better. There will always be people who are better, but we all do this stuff. We all measure. Everybody measures. Everybody's got an analytic solution. Everybody tests. Some people don't test very well, but everybody does it. Most people at least baseline personalize. And all of that does drive continuous improvement. But store side, not so much. This stuff doesn't happen on the stores. We can't measure it. We don't test. We don't personalize. And we don't much improve. Witness that Gap example. And if you can't do this in one of the cornerstones of the omnichannel experience, how can you be good at omnichannel? I'm here to tell you, omnichannel involves the store, not just digital. That's not omnichannel, that's digital. If you want to be good at omnichannel, you have to be good in every channel. And if the store is a part of your channel, you have to be good at the store. And that means bringing these methodologies to the physical world. Well, traditionally, that's been incredibly difficult. I describe the store as a black box, and I went out and I found this store that's the black store, right? Nothing to do with that, but I thought it was pretty funny. And the thing is, here's what retailers know. Here's what the best retailers in the world right now know about their stores. They know how many customers come in. It's called door counting. When you walk into most stores, if you look up, you will see a camera above the door. Or maybe you'll see a little electronic device over to the right. Those measure how many people came into the store. Door counting. What else do we know? We know what we sold. Point of sale. What gets checked out at the cash register. That's it. That's what people in stores know. If you're an analyst working for a store, for some of the largest retailers in the world, those are the 2 data points you have. Now think about doing website optimization with those 2 data points. Imagine walking into somebody's office and saying, I've been studying our website, I know how many visits we get, and I know what we sold. Now I'm going to optimize. Right? It's impossible. It's friggin' implausible. You can't do it. That's what analysts in the physical world have been faced with. That's the data they've had. It's no wonder that they haven't improved that much. They had never had the data about what actually happens in the customer experience. And if you think about this, even in the nirvana of retailing, your most loyal, identified customers, people who are in your loyalty program, who every time they check out, whip out their card and identify themselves, there's still a ton of fundamental questions that you can't answer. You don't know if they came to the store and didn't buy anything. You don't know when or if they talked to associates or not. You don't know whether those interactions created lift. You don't know what the real conversion rate in the store is. You don't know what things they shopped and didn't buy. Think about it. Because in the digital world, we're used to knowing all that stuff. When we have a regular customer who comes to the website, we know exactly what they look at. We know when they look at something new. We know when they gave deeper consideration to something. We know when they're moving through the purchase cycle. And we're personalizing the experience at every step along the way to make it better for them. But in the store world, even for our loyalty members, we don't know any of that stuff. And I think that's a huge miss. I got so used to doing business a certain way on digital that when I recognized you couldn't do it that way on the store side, I thought it was crazy. And the thing is, from my perspective, this has changed. Because in the last couple years, a set of technologies have emerged that make physical spaces measurable. These aren't great. None of these technologies are perfect or anything like perfect, but they do work. And there's really 3 that are out there. I'm going to talk a little more detail about the technology later, but the 3 big technologies for measuring the way people move through physical spaces are, number 1, Wi-Fi. Every Wi-Fi system out there can geolocate people based upon their phones pinging out to the Wi-Fi device. And you don't have to connect to the Wi-Fi to do this. Phones constantly, as you move around, are pinging out to the world saying, is there a Wi-Fi network here? And they do that unless you turn off your Wi-Fi radio. So by the way, if you don't want to be tracked when you go in a store, turn off your friggin' Wi-Fi before, I shouldn't tell you that. I much prefer you to have your Wi-Fi on. But the thing is that Wi-Fi can do this. It's not great. There's some issues with it. I'll talk about that later. Mobile app. If you have mobile apps, you should geolocate them. Mobile apps are an incredible source of data in every respect. They're an incredible omnichannel tool. But by dropping a tiny little bit of code, almost like a website tag, into your mobile app, you get geolocation data about how those mobile app users are navigating the store. It's really easy. It's super powerful. And oh my God, it's actually accurate, which in my business now is like Nirvana. The only real drawback to measuring your mobile app users is they're just your mobile app users, right? It's usually a small percentage of your overall population. But to understand how they're using the store, how they're navigating, what they're looking at and not buying, that's incredibly powerful. And then video camera. You walk into most stores these days, if you look up in the ceilings, you're going to see cameras. Those cameras are there for security, but a lot of times these days they're doing double duty for measurement. I know it's a little creepy. I'll talk about the security implications, privacy implications of this, but it works. Each of these technologies have made it possible for you to track the way people go in the store, the way they move, the journey they take, where they spend time, and they allow you to answer fundamental questions about how shoppers are navigating the store. And keep in mind, these are anonymous. You don't know who these people are. They're not identified. You don't know it's Mary Jane. You don't know it's Gary walking through the store. You can't ping out and build a profile on me. I'll talk about how you can do that in some cases. But for the most part, what you're looking at is data about how people are using the store. But that's really powerful. It's what we use all the time on the website. And it allows you to answer fundamental questions about how the store is working that no one's ever been able to answer before. You know, if you've got 400 stores out there, wouldn't it be nice to know why they're different and how they're different? If the store in Dallas works differently than the store in Austin or the store in San Francisco, the seasons are different, the populations are different, you can pretty well bet that the store is going to be different. Localization really matters from a store perspective. If you're used to doing websites where we tend to think of everything as at least national and sometimes global, getting into the store world is shockingly local. But that's part of what makes it interesting from an analytics perspective and part of what makes it powerful because there's so much variation from store to store to store. When I visit a Gap store in San Francisco and then I come to Austin and I visit a Gap, I often see some really significant differences. And I think that's interesting, and there's a lot of analytic opportunity in that to make things better. So how to think about this data? Well, I use this as an example. This is a planogram of a bookstore. And think about a customer navigating through the bookstore, right? That might be a typical path. I buy a lot of books, so I picked a bookstore out of this. It's my favorite kind of store. So if that's a typical path, what you'd kind of want to know is like, well, that's the path through the store, but where do people stop and actually spend time? Okay? So I flagged all those places. And then if you knew what was at those places, think about taking that planogram and mapping where the customer spent time and saying, hey, this is Gary. He spent time in science fiction, mystery, stopped at the calendar section, God knows why, and then looked at science magazines. Okay, that might be a pretty typical visit for me. Then if you look at how long I spent in those things, you've got data that ought to be startlingly similar to website data, right? If you ever spent time analyzing websites, well, think about that as pages and time on page and a journey with a path. It's exactly the same. That's what really appealed to me about this. I took a look at this and I said, you know what? This is friggin' the same stuff I've been doing for 20 years, but in a whole new space where people haven't tackled it and they don't know how to do it very well. And if you think about it, I think there's a very straightforward mapping between what we do routinely in the digital world and what we can now do in the physical world. We did path analysis over here. We can do path analysis in the store. It's exactly the same. We used to do something in digital called functional analysis, where we looked at the function of each part of the website, the routers, the convincers, the closer pages. Well, the same kinds of things exist in the stores. Stores have space that's meant to draw you in. They have space that's meant to channel you in certain directions. And they have space for impulse buys, right next to the cash register, right, when you're queued up. Funnel abandonment, right? One of the ways we optimize websites is looking at where people leave. Same thing in store. Where do people leave? How far do they get? What do they look at? Content attribution. When you go to a website, you're engaged with content. But it's the same in the store, right? You're engaged with product and experience. And now we can actually look at which of those products and experiences are engaging people and which aren't. Associated content. If you looked at this, you might be interested in this. It's exactly the same in the store. Cross-sell merchandising. Stores think about this. They do it with point of sale. They've never had an opportunity to do it with the way people shop. Okay, so why do this? I hope for an audience. Sometimes when I go out and I talk to people who are in physical retail, I really have to work to explain why you use analytics to make things better. I'm hoping for this audience that's not so necessary. But here's the type of stuff that we routinely do with this kind of analytics. One, improve store layout and merchandising. This is like the basic website stuff, right? This is the blocking and tackling of the way the store is. It's a thing. And like anything, it can be made better. More functional, more persuasive, and more engaging. The second thing we do, and this is a little different than in the digital world, we do a lot of optimization around associates. Associates are expensive. They're a significant cost. They're very optimizable. You can tell them where to go, where to spend time, where to send customers, how to talk to customers, and all of those things make a huge difference in the experience. Measuring and optimizing how associate interactions are working is an incredible driver of lift in stores. And of course, if you combine those two things together, what you're really doing is optimizing experience. And I think all three of those things are really fundamental to this business. Now, when I talk about this stuff, I tend to focus on stores. And it's what we think about. When I got into the business, I was thinking primarily about stores. But the truth is, this isn't just about stores. For any business that has physical locations, this kind of measurement technology can help you improve those locations. I've been somewhat surprised about the range of applications that we can bring to the table with this. Some of the places we've done work, and I'm going to show you in a second, retail banking. You got branches. Branches are really interesting. I'm actually going to show you a case study of doing this kind of stuff for branches. Hospitality, resorts, a place like this, friggin' awesome for measurement, right? Think about it. You got these incredible customer journeys. People are all over the place doing really interesting things. You know who they are. They're all logged into the Wi-Fi. You can track and figure out what they like, how they spend time, and how you can optimize their next visit. That's so cool from a customer perspective. Public spaces. We've done this at airports. Airports are really cool, by the way, and boy, do they need optimization. And then sports arenas, the one on the top. Sports arenas turn out to be like cities where everybody comes in 4 hours and leaves in 4 hours, right? It's a really fascinating aspect of customer dynamics. In all of these cases, the ability to measure the way people move, what they do, how they engage, what they're actually enjoying during the experience is super powerful. So this isn't just about retail. This is really about any kind of physical location that can be measured and optimized. So now I'm going to walk you through 3 quick case studies here. The first one is retail, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about how we do this to give you a sense, I think mostly about how similar it is to digital analytics. That's my main goal with this. In this case, we were looking at a retailer, athletic apparel, and they had a lot of questions about the shoe wall. Shoe wall was very important to them. It was one of the major things in the store. They know it's very associate intensive, right? You shop for shoes, you got to talk to someone. It's not a DIY kind of process because most of the inventory is out back. So some of the questions they had were, do we have enough associates at the shoe wall? When does it make a difference? How much of a difference does it make? Okay, very straightforward, good questions, important stuff to be able to answer. So we started by mapping the space digitally. That's always the first step. Then we map usage. This is just a heat map of how people are actually using the store. The shoe wall is down there at the bottom. And you can see the red color means it's one of the most intensively used areas of the store. The next thing we did was look at the paths. How did people come into the store? Where did they go? Oh God, did I skip ahead? So I did. I'm gonna go, okay. Peak times, daytime partying was the next thing we did. We looked at each time of day, each day of week, to see if there were patterns about when the shoe wall got busy, right? Stores are a little different than websites. You don't care too much if there's a lot of people on the website, but you sure as heck do care in the store. It makes a huge difference. So this kind of daytime partying is really fundamental. Full pathing. This is understanding, okay, this is how people got to the shoe wall. Where did they go? Did they stop first? What did they look at? Drilling down to the shoe wall, here we're looking at individual display level statistics about what attracted people and how much time they spent in the store. Okay? Taking that and then saying, hey, if we look at the times when we had 5 shoppers for each associate, 7 shoppers for each associate, 15 shoppers for each associate, what was the conversion rate? Because we're tracking the whole journey of the customer. At any given time, we know exactly how many shoppers were at the shoe wall, exactly how many associates were there, and we know what the conversion rate was for those shoppers. And from that, we can derive something that basically tells us, hey, when you get more than 7 shoppers per associate, your conversion tanks. And then it goes even further down when you get up there around 13 or 14 to 1. And what's more, when we did this, we found that there were distinct times a day and a couple days during the week when this happened routinely. They were leaving money on the table. Because what happens is when people see the shoe wall that crowded, they turn around and leave. Nobody knew that. There's no counterpart to that on the website. I guess maybe really slow page loads might be a counterpart. But basically, What was happening here was the store got crowded, the shoe wall got crowded, customers would come in, look, couldn't see an associate, would leave. Money on the table. There were also other times when they were way overstaffed, when they had more associates than they actually needed. That's money too. It's a really high, really easy ROI way to drive improvement in a business. Okay, retail banking. This is another kind of example. This was one basically where the bank came up with a new strategy. They wanted tellers to come out from behind their cages and work the line. They wanted a teller, when the line got long, to come out and talk to people in the line, to actually help them figure out were they in the right place, to help them figure out how to self-service and educate themselves. It's called retailing the line in the banking industry, and it's a really interesting strategy. They put a policy in place to do that, and one of the questions they had was, do our branches actually do it? Right? When you put personalization in the website, you know it's doing it. The website's just a tool. But branches are made up of people, and there's hundreds of them, and they may or may not implement policies. So the first thing we looked at was, are people actually doing this? Are the branches actually retailing the line? That's the first thing we measured. The second thing we measured was, when are they doing it? If we look at branches, are there certain times of day or days of the week when they actually implement this policy, and other times when they don't? This was news to the senior managers who put the policy in place. The third thing we looked at was, how much variation is there from branch to branch? It's not one thing, it's not monolithic. That's an important lesson to be learned in physical retail. Well, what we found was, you can look at the ratio of the orange to the red there, and you can see there's massive difference from branch to branch. The red is how many interactions they had, the orange is how often they retailed the line. Some branches were doing it all the time. Some branches were never doing it. That's a powerful learning right there. The third thing we looked at was how successful it was from a customer perspective. We did voice a customer in the branch. For people who know my work on the digital side, you probably know I'm a big fan of integrating voice of customer into behavioral data. That hasn't changed. I'm still a big fan of integrating voice of customer into behavioral data. I think it's a tremendously powerful combination. In this case, what we did was we actually put people in the branch, and as they left, we asked, what did you think? We also did email follow-up surveys to people. It's very easy to do that, totally inexpensive. We asked them how they liked their experience, and then we tied it to the actual behavior. We were measuring whether there was retailing going on in the branch. So one of the things we could look at was what the customer said, how satisfied they were with that experience, and whether the retailing was actually happening or not. And by doing that, we were actually able to see a couple things that were really interesting. One, we could see that when people came into the branch and they were retailing the line, it actually took a little longer to service them. When you bring a teller out and put them in front of the line and put them working the line, they're not quite as efficient. When they're back behind the window, they actually help more people in a shorter amount of time. So when you bring someone out, people were actually, on average, spending a little more time in line. What was interesting, though, was the voice of customer was consistently higher when people were retailing the line. People felt like they were getting better service, even though they were spending, on average, a little longer in line. I thought that was a really interesting implication of this, and something that was pretty unexpected. So there were some other things we found about this that I think surprised us. Branch satisfaction went up. Likelihood of branch product upsell went up significantly, which was something they were really pleased about. Some of the things that they were hoping for did not materialize. One of the things they thought was that when people came out and retailed the line, one of the things they were supposed to be doing, and I think maybe were, I'm not really sure, we couldn't really test that, was teaching people how to use the mobile app. So one of the things we looked for was increased uses of mobile app by people who were in the branch when the line was being retailed. We couldn't find that. Didn't seem to have any effect. People who used the branch continued to use the branch. They didn't seem to use the mobile app more. That was disappointing. Not everything in this study was a positive. The fact that the line took a little longer, and the fact that we weren't really shifting people onto the mobile app, both those were disappointments. The fact that we were improving voice of customer, and the fact that people bought more products from the branch, those were positives. It's all really good stuff. Really good stuff about how a program works and opportunities to make it better. Not everything works. No program I've ever seen worked in every respect. So I mentioned sports. I'm a big sports fan. I love sports. When we get a chance to do arenas, we're always really, really excited. But arenas are fascinating. And it's the same process for analytics. You map the arena. This is harder. Mapping a store is pretty easy. It takes about 5 minutes to map most stores. You know, you go into a Gap and you can map it in 5 minutes. Mapping these friggin' arenas is a pain in the ass. It's really hard. It takes hours and hours of work to map an arena because they are huge and they're very complex spaces. So the mapping step here is pretty challenging. The second thing we do is just look at the basic descriptives. How do people flow? And we look at this on a very time basis. The first time we did an arena analysis, we came back to the client, and I'm a little embarrassed about this, but you know, you learn. We said, well, geez, look at this. It's super crowded during these times. And they're like, yeah, that's halftime. They weren't impressed, right? It's like, well, it's so crowded, right? The things that worked in stores turned out not to be so interesting from arenas. Arenas have very distinct patterns of usage. And so from that perspective, what we do is we look at the basic descriptives and we see, well, at halftime, are some of the concession places not keeping up? That's interesting. There's learnings to be had, right, from that. So just measuring those queue and linger times, those are really important experience places for a lot of people. So that's the first thing we measure. Then what we do is we take the way people actually behave and we build segmentations. Sports people tend to be very interested from a CRM perspective. They actually know who these people are. These are regular fans. They attend. They're season ticket holders. We can actually tie them back to their overall data, and we can build this kind of segmentation where we can tell the sports team how this fan likes to behave at the stadium. Do they like to come early or late? Do they shop the team store? What kind of concessions do they like? When do they like to go? And what's really cool is they actually use this to drive personalization. So they've got a mobile app, and they actually use this kind of information to message out to people and get them to do more and better stuff, to tell them when their favorite concession stand has a low line and when they can do it, to offer them coupons for that, to get them to come to games that otherwise they might not have gone to, but that fit the pattern of the kind of games they like. This is super powerful data. You cannot go wrong personalizing on the basis of this. So I wanted to wrap up just giving you a little bit of an introduction to the technologies here. I mentioned that they're hard and they're challenging. So here are the four, I guess I had three before, but I've kind of added one here. Here are the four basic technologies you should understand about this. The first is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is great for big spaces. When we do stadiums and airports, we almost always use Wi-Fi. It's inexpensive. You already have it. It generates the positional data. What's a drawback from Wi-Fi perspective is it's not very accurate. Wi-Fi cannot position people very accurately. We talk about it as basically being able to position me on this stage. So as I move around, Wi-Fi knows I'm somewhere on the stage, but that's about it, right? That's not very good. It's good enough for an airport. I know whether you're in the TSA line or I know whether you're a baggage claim. But in a store, it doesn't tell me what aisle you're in, and it doesn't tell me what product you're looking at. So if you need positional accuracy, Wi-Fi is not appropriate. Mobile app is great, highly accurate, allows you to tie to the actual consumer. It's got everything going for it, except it's just your mobile app users. That's the only drawback. Passive sniffer is an electronic technique. It's similar to Wi-Fi, but it's significantly more accurate. Passive sniffers can get you down to a space about this big, about 2 squares. Usually good enough for us to really understand how a shopper journey is going. And then video camera. Video camera is super accurate, positions you exactly where you are, can even give you things like gender and age, but, and here's the big drawback to camera, it's expensive. God, putting those cameras in the system costs a lot, up in the ceiling costs a lot of money. So that's probably the biggest drawback to camera systems. Each of these have pros and cons. It's detailed in the slide deck, and you guys can check this out at your leisure if you have particular concerns. The most common configurations for us when we deploy this stuff are electronics to collect the whole journey and camera on entry. So we see how many people we're missing with the electronics. We think that's a good configuration, seems to work pretty well, but we do this differently for almost every space. Every physical space is unique and different. Last thing I want to talk about, because this is a digital audience and you always care about this, is can I actually join this to my digital exhaust? Can I tell who these people are? It's a really good question. The answer is mostly no. This is anonymous data. Just like a digital, just like a website, people come on, you drop a cookie, all you know is it's a device. Here are the places that you can de-anonymize people. Number one, if they connect to your Wi-Fi, you can opt them in and de-anonymize them for the thousands of people that connect to your Wi-Fi in a store. This works well in some places. Airports have pretty good connection rates. Arenas have pretty good connection rates. Big places often do, stores almost never. Mobile app is the perfect way to connect digital exhaust to in-store behavior. It works, it's easy, it's really effective. Highly recommend that. Point of sale. When someone checks out, if they swipe a loyalty card or your store credit card or you identify them in any way, you can connect the point of sale session to the rest of what they did in the store. That's powerful. And then loyalty programs. When you have an explicit loyalty app, you can connect that to the store behavior. Privacy, I'm sure you're wondering, is this okay? Can we really do this? It's very similar to digital. The key with privacy is that you must let people know you're doing it. There must be signage on the store, and you must give people an opt-out. And you must honor that opt-out. If you don't do that, you get in trouble. It's very similar to the way the world works in digital analytics. So here's the summary, the things I want you guys to really take away from this. 1, this is a huge miss. The fact that people aren't doing this just totally sucks. 2, measurement technologies now exist that can do this job. They're not great. They all have problems. Some of them are expensive. There's a lot of accuracy issues, but they do work. It's worth getting involved. These technologies spin out data that's very similar to what you're already working with. If you know digital data, you know how to do this. I think that's really cool and powerful. Analyzing this data brings real opportunities for continuous improvement. And you know what? The suckier someone is at something, the bigger the opportunities for improvement are, which is why this is a good space to be focusing on. Integrating in-store with digital is hard. It's very difficult to do. There's not obvious joint opportunities, but there are 3 or 4 places where you can join the data and get that mythical, wonderful nirvana of a full, true 360 customer view that we all talk about. So that's really my pitch. What I'm hoping for is that more and more people will adopt this stuff. I think it's the most exciting area in analytics, really enjoying doing it. I think it's a place where you can bring all of your digital expertise in how to optimize things, how to measure things, and how to make them better to a world that desperately needs it. Thank you.